One of the best Christian movies I've ever seen is God's Not Dead. It tells the story of Josh Wheaton, a college student and evangelical Christian who enrolls in a philosophy class taught by Professor Jeffrey Radisson, an atheist. Professor Radisson demands that his students sign a declaration that God is dead to pass the course. And Josh, the only student to do so, refuses. And so Professor Radisson requires Josh to debate with him and let his other students decide the winner. And in the movie God's Not Dead, in the first two debates, Radisson has counter-arguments for all of Josh's points. And in a key scene in the movie, Josh's girlfriend, Kara, demands Josh either sign the statement or drop Professor Radisson's class. Because standing up to Professor Radisson will jeopardize their academic future. And when Josh refuses, Kara breaks up with him. It's often said that suffering and adversity brings out the true worth of people and strengthens their faith. And that was no less true of Josh Wheaton, who put God first and who was not afraid to stand up and to be counted for his faith. He was not afraid to be a partaker in suffering for Jesus Christ. And that's the focus for our reflections today as we continue to read the fourth chapter of Peter's first letter, written to a people, to Christians who were suffering. And what Peter is saying to the Christians is to partake in the suffering, to partake in the suffering. It goes with the territory of being a follower of Jesus Christ. Let's read from 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 12 through to 16, as we think today about the importance and the challenge of being partakers of suffering as a Christian. Peter writes, "Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you, but rejoice insofar as you share Christ's sufferings, that you may also rejoice and be glad when his glory is revealed. If you are insulted for the name of Christ, you are blessed, just as Josh Wheaton was in the movie God's Not Dead. He was insulted for the name of Christ." Peter goes on to write, "Because the Spirit of glory and of God rests upon you. But let none of you suffer as a murderer or a thief or an evildoer or as a meddler. Yet if anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God in that name." Rejoice, says Peter, when you have the name Christian attached to you. Peter here talks about the fiery trial which is to try you. It goes with the territory of being a Christian. And what Peter is saying to the church which had been scattered into the church who was suffering was, by suffering you're partaking in the glory and joy that Jesus Christ had. Don't see these as anything but what Jesus himself went through. It's interesting because Peter once told Jesus, remember, to avoid the suffering of the cross. Just read Mark 8:32 to 33. Once it seemed strange to the Apostle Peter that his master should think of suffering, writes F.B. Meyer. Now he thinks it strange that he could have imagined anything else. We've got to partake of Christ's sufferings. If we declare ourselves to be Christians as followers of Jesus Christ, it goes with the territory that we will suffer for being a Christian. It's good to share anything with Jesus, even his suffering. And it's so easy to embrace the glory and the joy and to want that, and to avoid any notion of sharing Jesus' suffering. But we should never deny or dilute the importance of suffering in terms of it building godliness into our lives. Jesus, God brings us through situations, through fiery trials, through periods of suffering. It may be physical, emotional, whatever, in order that he can build godliness into us. If suffering was a suitable tool to teach Jesus, Hebrews 5:8, it's a suitable tool to teach Jesus' followers. Suffering for the name of Jesus Christ, writes Peter, is a blessing because it shows that we are really following Jesus. We're not playing at churches. We're not playing at being a Christian. We're nailing our colours to the mast as Josh Wheaton did. He was reproached for the name of Christ. He suffered because he stood up and was counted, because he identified himself with Jesus. We expect the world to blaspheme Jesus, but on our part, he is glorified. The world will take Jesus down. We ought to lift Jesus up. If anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed. You know, suffering as a Christian is nothing, according to what Peter writes and what the Bible teaches, is nothing to be ashamed about. Yes, the world may despise and laugh at the suffering Christian, but instead we should glorify God that we are suffering on account of Jesus Christ, because God is with us in those fiery trials. God is with us in the difficult situations. God is faithful. Life is tough, but God is faithful. We don't glorify God for suffering, but we should glorify him in suffering and glorify him for what he will accomplish in us and through us with the suffering that we read of in being aligned to Jesus Christ. Peter talks about having that badge, that name of a Christian. And this highlights that the name had become very widely used in the culture and in the day in which Peter is writing, so much so that one could be persecuted for being numbered as a Christian. May we be willing to take our stand for Jesus Christ. May we be willing, like Josh Wheaton was in God's Not Dead, to stand up and be counted. May we be willing to say, we follow Jesus. We are Christians. For if we do, God will honour us for doing so. It says in the old book, they who honour me, I also will honour.